In the whispering echoes of prehistory, before the Emperor walked Terra, and before the stars burned with the wars of 1,000,000 species, there was another hand at work. A hand ancient beyond measure, whose fingers shaped life itself across the canvas of the galaxy. The Old Ones, so little known, yet so central to everything. And in the shadow of their legacy, a terrible theory festers, that mankind, in all its chaos and splendor, was not an accident of evolution, not even a divine spark, but a weapon, one they built, one they seeded, one that waited in silence across uncountable millennia, and now, finally, has begun to fire. This isn't just another grim-dark tale. This is a theory that turns the whole of human history in Warhammer 40K into a ticking time bomb, counting down since the war in heaven. If it holds true, then every act of defiance, every psyker's scream, every moment of triumph and tragedy, they aren't the steps of a people forging their destiny. They're the automatic functions of a machine waking up, a weapon unshackled, and perhaps, just perhaps, now completely out of control. The Old Ones were not gods, though to speak of them now is to brush against the divine. They were not infallible, nor were they invincible, but they were architects of such scale and subtlety that the scars of their ambitions still writhe across the stars. What we know of them is filtered through the ruins of ruin, shattered Aldari records, orc fungal instinct, the silent hatred of the Necrons, and the shadowed hints buried deep in human archaeotech. And from these fragments, one thing emerges with haunting clarity. The Old Ones made life not as a gift, but as a weapon. During the war in heaven, the Old Ones were not philosophers, not creators of peace. They were generals in a war that dwarfed even the Horus heresy. Faced with the soulless Necrons and the living gods of the Catan, they unleashed biology as a form of armament. They sculpted the Krork to be unstoppable warriors, built the ancestors of the Aldari to be masters of the warp, and seeded entire ecosystems with lifeforms designed to react, adapt, and obey. They made tools of species. They weaponized evolution. And it is into this tapestry of violent genius that we must consider the terrifying possibility that humans, lowly, fragile, endlessly defiant humans, were another such tool, sculpted with purpose, then left to bloom like a trap set for a war already ancient. But where the Krork were obvious, the human handprint is more subtle. There are no clear stories of human creation in Xenos myths, no ancient carvings with unmistakable human silhouettes etched by saurian claws. What we do have is a shape that fits too well, too neatly, into a cosmic whole too large to be coincidence. The Old Ones prized psychic potential, and humans are a psychic species. The Old Ones waged war through proxies, and humans adapt to serve war more rapidly than any known race. The Old Ones designed living weapons that could evolve, multiply, and dominate, and humans have spread across the galaxy like wildfire, heedless of gods or doom. There is a lingering question that plagues all those who study the age of strife and the rise of mankind. How did such a species, so unremarkable in biology, come to dominate a galaxy brimming with the ruins of far older empires? The Necrontire needed divine intervention. The Aldari were sculpted in spirit and soul. The orcs were built by genius engineers of instinct and spores. And yet humans, hairless apes born on a backwater planet, now stride the stars bearing the imperium of man upon their shoulders. It strains belief that this is mere luck or evolution unassisted. It feels too much like design. The Old Ones were not perfect. Their creations betrayed them, fought them, outgrew them. The Krork became orcs. The Aldari fell to decadence and birthed a god of death and desire. If humans were another strand in their war-weaving, perhaps we too slipped the leash. Perhaps we were not meant to rise this far, or this fast. Or perhaps we were never meant to awaken until the moment was truly right. A last gambit to be triggered long after the Old Ones had turned to dust and silence. A final curse for the Necrons. a final bulwark against chaos, or a final catastrophe. We must not forget, the Old Ones lost. Their weapons failed them. Their enemies endure. But even a failed weapon can remain loaded. Even a dying race can whisper the shape of vengeance into the genome of a child species. It is within this context, this horror of ancient intention, that we begin to understand mankind not as a rising power, but as an echo. A whisper from the past shouted into the stars, a remnant of a plan too old to remember and far too dangerous to ignore. There is something uncannily wrong about humanity's position in the galaxy. Not merely that we have survived, but that we persist, adapt, and conquer in ways that defy the galactic norm. Most species reach a peak, a plateau of evolution or cultural maturity, and then ossify. The Eldar with their art and prophecy, the Tau with their static caste systems, even the Orcs, for all their chaos, operate on an ancient instinctual logic. Humanity, though? We mutate through ideas, erupt into innovation, and in every age find new forms of war, new ways to resist extinction. It is as if something in us is hardwired not just for survival, but for triumph through struggle, as if we were built for war, not just in flesh, but in soul. There is no better example of this than our seemingly innate resistance to total annihilation. When the dark age of technology collapsed into techno-barbarism and psychic firestorms, any other species would have shattered. But humanity fragmented, fought, and then reassembled itself into an empire spanning 1,000,000 worlds. When the Great Crusade collapsed into the heresy, we should have crumbled under the weight of betrayal and demonic revelation. But we endured, even if it meant reshaping our society into a paranoid theocracy running on sacrifice and brutality. These aren't the responses of a culture evolved naturally. They're responses of something that, by design, is never truly defeated, only transformed. Humans aren't strong. We aren't the fastest, nor the smartest, nor the most psychically attuned. Yet we are relentless. We multiply across death worlds, adapt to the void, build cities in hellish gravity, and on moons bathed in radiation. We don't just colonize. We terraform not only land, but culture. Every planet becomes a reflection of humanity in one grotesque or glorious form. It's as if our base coding is not to preserve life, but to dominate the conditions of life itself, to overwrite reality with our own imprint, no matter how harsh or alien it may be. Then there is the matter of psychic sensitivity. Compared to the Aldari, we are crude and dangerous. Our psychers are often unstable, unpredictable, and horrifying in their corruption potential. But the sheer number of them, and the rate at which latent psychic abilities are appearing in the population, is accelerating. It's a wildfire that the Imperium tries desperately to contain, yet cannot extinguish. If the Old Ones embedded psychic potential as a seed in humanity, then it is now blooming in earnest. And it does not bloom in serenity. It explodes in visions, in madness, in power that tears reality. That does not suggest accidental evolution. It suggests a time-released weapon now reaching its critical stage. Even our emotional spectrum sets us apart. Humanity is capable of savage hatred and transcendent love, sometimes in the same breath. We burn worlds out of spite and save strangers out of principle. We die for flags, for ideas, for symbols, irrational acts by biological logic, yet deeply potent in terms of creating cohesion, purpose, and martyrdom. These traits, if viewed as byproducts of design, become deeply unnerving. This isn't a species meant to live in harmony. It's one designed to propagate conflict, to find meaning through war, to grow through opposition. That is not a flaw. That is a weapon's function. The galaxy teems with life forms crafted with clear purposes. The Krork were made to fight forever. The Slan are psychic architects. The Tyranids, though likely alien to even the Old Ones, are pure consumption given form. In contrast, humanity is a contradiction. Fragile yet unconquerable, divided yet united under the lash, irrational yet devastatingly effective. The combination is too precise to be ignored. It is a chaos function, a weapon not forged to be controlled, but to catalyze entropy in its enemies, to confuse, overwhelm, and eventually replace them. Perhaps that is why mankind's rise feels inevitable, not accidental. Not because we are chosen, but because we are designed to fill the vacuum left by extinction, like mold growing in the cracks of fallen gods. We are not the next step in evolution. We are the next contingency, a living virus of adaptation and conquest. The old ones may be gone, but in humanity their final experiment might still be running. Or worse, completing its objective. The warp has always been the crucible of the old one's grand experiment, not merely a battlefield, but the very canvas on which they painted their victory. To master it was to shape reality through thought, to wage war with will alone. It is no accident that their greatest creations, the Aldari, the Slann, and perhaps even the Krork in their own brutish way, bore powerful ties to the Immaterium. The warp was both their tool and their undoing. And it is into this treacherous ocean of thought and madness that humanity now surges, unbidden and raw, like a newborn shark in blood-churned water. Humanity's bond with the warp is not refined. It is not beautiful. It is not even remotely safe. But it is vast, terrifyingly vast. No other race in the galaxy births psychers at the rate humans do. No other race, not even the Eldar before their fall, spread such a wildfire of psychic turbulence across space. In this age, psychers appear on almost every world, often without warning, and often with catastrophic consequences. Some call it evolution, others call it doom. But perhaps it is something far older, a buried protocol awakening at last. Consider this. What if the old ones embedded psychic potential in humanity not as a gift, but as a contingency? Not to be refined and cultured like with the Aldari, but to serve as a detonator, a living species whose raw psychic signal would one day flare across the galaxy like a flare gun aimed at the gods. The soul storms that now rage across the warp, the demons that gnaw at the edges of reality, even the sheer noise of human dreams. These are not mere byproducts. They are the ignition of a weapon meant to blind, disrupt, and ultimately destroy anything that still walks in the echo of the Catan. The Imperium fears the Psyker not just because of chaos, but because their existence shreds the veil between real space and the warp. Each one is a beacon, a flare, a possible breach. And yet, the Emperor himself, a being of immense psychic power, chose not to eliminate Psykers, but to manage them. The black ships come not to exterminate, but to harvest, to fuel the Astronomicon, to sustain the psychic architecture of the Imperium. Even in death, human Psykers are turned into tools of civilization. What other species treats soul death as infrastructure? What other culture integrates the psychic scream of a million minds into its very navigation system? There's a hidden implication here. Perhaps the warp sensitivity of humans isn't a curse to be controlled. Perhaps it is the entire point. A galactic-level feedback loop. Billions of minds feeding into the warp, amplifying its storms, destabilizing its calm. Not merely reacting to chaos, but feeding it, intentionally or otherwise. Could it be that the Old Ones saw chaos not as a corruption, but as a weapon in itself? Something to be aimed? And if so, did they build humanity to wield that weapon through simple presence? Not intention. The Aldari tried to control the warp, to harmonize with it, to shape it through pleasure and artistry. They failed. They birthed a god that devoured their empire. The humans, though, have never tried to control the warp. We bludgeon it. We bleed into it. We warp it through pain and ecstasy and terror. Our saints are miracles. Our sorcerers are horrors. Our thoughts do not caress the immaterium. They detonate into it. And perhaps, in that brutality, lies a design far older than we dare admit. Even the concept of chaos gods may not be a true aberration. If humanity was meant to ignite the warp, then the rise of Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh could be seen as a success condition. The war forms of the enemy destabilized into hunger entities, no longer capable of logic or control, only eternal war. What better trap for the Necrons, who cannot enter the warp? What better counter for Catan, who abhor its touch? Humanity may be the hammer, but the warp is the anvil, and the noise we make by striking it might be the song of galactic ruin. This isn't speculation from a position of hope. It's a horror buried in our bones. We were not designed to understand the warp. We were designed to stir it, to rouse it, to wake what lies within it. And now, it is fully awake. There is a mystery in the ancient architecture of the galaxy, a riddle etched into stone and star, hinted at in ruins too old to date and devices too advanced to replicate. Scattered across forgotten worlds and buried beneath the ash of dead civilizations lie remnants of a web of transit, a network of near-divine engineering, the webway. It is known to the Aldari, feared by the Necrons, and studied with desperation by the Adeptus Mechanicus. But there is a quiet anomaly in its locks and keys, a strange compatibility with human physiology and thought. And that raises a question more chilling than any archaeological mystery. Why can we enter? The webway was not meant for us. It was built long before our species ever stood upright. Its corridors twist through dimensions our minds can barely comprehend. Its stabilizers sing in frequencies tuned to psychic harmonics unfamiliar to the human soul. And yet, when human psychers and scientists attempt to penetrate it, the doors do not always reject us. On rare occasions, they open. Not cleanly, not safely, but enough to prove a terrible point. The webway recognizes something in us, some fragment, some cipher, some buried pattern. And in this era, with the Emperor's shattered golden throne forming a tenuous bridge into that labyrinth, the implications can no longer be dismissed. There are theories, heretical, hidden, that suggest humanity was not merely a later arrival to the webway, but a built-in function. That buried in our ancient genome is the code to interface with it, not with precision, but with resonance. The webway is thought-structured, guided by intent and psychic imprint. If humans were seeded with the potential to one day walk it, then it would mean we were not only crafted for war, but also for transit. Strategic deployment. A species made not only to destroy, but to arrive, suddenly, violently, precisely where we were needed most, or feared most. The ancient artifacts recovered from lost human colonies often bear symbols that mirror webway glyphs, not identically, but in thematic rhythm. Circles, spirals, interlocking loops of transit and transformation. These are dismissed as coincidence or cargo cult residue. But when viewed through the lens of ancient genetic memory, they take on a new tone. What if these designs are not learned but remembered? What if somewhere in the collective unconscious of our species lies a map we can no longer read, a route we were meant to follow, encoded not in language but in myth, dream, and madness? And then there is the Golden Throne itself, a machine of impossible complexity, built during the dark age of technology, or perhaps before, and repurposed by the Emperor to both sustain his spirit and keep the Imperial Webway project barely functional. This device is not a human invention. It is a convergence of something deeper. The Emperor's mastery of it suggests familiarity, yes, but also inheritance. He did not merely build it. He claimed it, as if it was waiting for him. As if it was meant for a being who bore the right psychic frequency, one found only in the twisted culmination of humanity's long, bloody arc. The Adeptus Mechanicus treats the throne and related tech with religious reverence, unable to replicate its functions, only maintain them through rite and ritual. But in their whispers, in the data prayers and binary chants, there are records of other devices, fragments of portals, stabilization cores, soul code sequencers, all echoing the same design language, and all showing signs of partial human compatibility, not perfect, not safe, but enough. Enough to suggest we were not meant to build the webway anew. We were meant to find it. to reactivate it, to walk roads long since closed to all others. The tragedy is that we do not understand what we are opening. The Aldari learned too late the cost of arrogance within the webway. Their gods fell, their cities were consumed. Now, as humanity fiddles with the locks of corridors forged in a war 10 million years past, we risk unleashing ghosts of conflicts we never knew we were part of. Or perhaps, in a more terrifying possibility, we are simply returning to the battlefield, exactly as planned. Time, for most species, is a measure of life. It moves forward, carving a path of memory and consequence. But for the designs of the old ones, time was something different. A medium for planning, a fabric on which to lay patterns that might not emerge for millions of years. Their war with the Necrons and the Citan was not one with immediate victories, but with strategies woven into the evolutionary arcs of life itself. They planted species like seeds of resistance, meant to grow, to evolve, and when the moment was right, to ignite. And what if humanity, so slow to awaken, so late to rise, was meant to be the last seed? A weapon with a timer, not a trigger. Consider the nature of time-delayed weapons. Not crude explosives, but complex systems that change with their environment, responding to conditions until they reach a state of critical functionality. The Krork were meant to be direct, immediate. But humans? Humans took the long path. We rose slowly, faltered, advanced, shattered ourselves, and then reassembled into something unrecognizable from what we began as. This isn't chaos, it's metamorphosis. And like any long-tail strategy, it takes time measured not in centuries but in eras. The Dark Age of technology is often described as humanity's zenith, but it may have been a necessary prelude, a stage in the arming process, a way for the species to reach a certain level of self-awareness and capability before it could move into its true function. The creation of the Men of Gold, the Men of Stone, and the Men of Iron wasn't merely technological achievement. It was a rehearsal for control, mastery, and eventual collapse, to see how we function in war, in rebellion, in apocalypse. And when it all fell, what remained was the core. The unbreakable will to persist, to adapt, to rise again from ash. If humans were a weapon seeded by the old ones, then we must ask why it took so long to bloom. The answer may lie in the destruction of the old ones themselves. Without their guidance, their seeded species were left to wander blindly. Perhaps humanity's psychic code was never activated, merely set to awaken under the right environmental and metaphysical conditions. The rise of chaos, the weakening of the veil, the reactivation of Necron tomb worlds. These galactic shifts may not be coincidences, but synchronizations, signs that the timer is reaching zero. The sheer improbability of human expansion also plays into this theory. With no divine intervention, no Citan-provided technology, and no godlike heritage, humanity still managed to conquer more of the galaxy than any other race. This isn't accidental. It's procedural, like a virus programmed to wait until the host is weakened before activating. Humanity's rise occurred precisely when the galaxy had suffered its greatest spiritual and structural fractures. We are not colonizers. We are opportunistic reclaimers, cleaning up a battlefield we were never supposed to remember. Even our theology supports this notion. The Imperial Creed teaches that humanity is destined to rule, that the galaxy is ours by divine right. But what if this belief isn't inspiration, but programming? A mimetic echo implanted eons ago to ensure cultural cohesion once the species reached galactic scale. Every aspect of our expansion, from the use of navigators to the genetic modification of warriors, mimics ancient Old One principles: psychic interface, adaptive evolution, ritualized purpose. We aren't imitating the past, we're fulfilling it. And in this fulfillment, the weapon finally ignites. Humanity no longer advances through enlightenment, but through domination. We crush stars beneath bureaucracy. We sanctify genocide. We sanctify ignorance. But it doesn't matter, because the function is being served. We are not here to build. We are here to unmake, to break the hold of ancient powers, to flood the warp with chaos and contradiction, to destroy what remains of the old enemies by replacing every star with a human cry of rage, every planet with a bastion of ordered madness. This is the weapon, now operational. Not a gun, not a fleet, not a god. A species, spread too far to be stopped, too brutal to be reasoned with, too broken to be corrupted. We are not the future. We are the fail-safe. And the countdown has long since ended. In the golden shroud of the dark age of technology, when human science brushed the divine, a new genesis unfolded, one that would define the arc of mankind's legacy and hint, perhaps, at its ancient origin. The men of gold, the pinnacle of human creation, living beings of unmatched intelligence, power, and psychic resonance. They were not machines, not exactly. They were synthetic humans, engineered with purpose and awe, forged to shepherd humanity through an age of unparalleled expansion. And in their design, in their very being, lies a question too disturbing to ignore. Were they truly made by humans? Or were they the echo of an older, forgotten template? The men of gold are often seen as the first lords of humanity, a bridge between the biological and the artificial. But they were more than that. They were flawless in function, superior in psychic power, and, most importantly, bearers of an almost mythical harmony with the warp. They guided, healed, defended. They did not fall to madness, nor stir the demons. Their presence in real space was like that of a stabilizer, a spiritual conductor rather than a beacon for horror. This trait alone sets them apart from any natural psychic evolution and places them suspiciously close to the kind of soulcraft the Old Ones were once known for. It is this psychic perfection that should give us pause. The Aldari, for all their finesse, birthed Slanesh through their excess. Humanity's current psychers are ticking time bombs, prone to corruption and possession. But the men of gold? They were immune. Or perhaps more accurately, they were aligned with the immaterium in a way that circumvented corruption entirely. This is not evolution. This is design. This is the hand of a creator who understood the warp as both weapon and canvas, just as the Old Ones once did. When the men of gold vanished, through betrayal, entropy, or some deeper fall, they left behind nothing replicable. Not even the Mechanicum, with all its rites and relics, could reproduce their essence. That absence, that void, echoes not of a technology lost, but of a birthright denied. As if humanity had inherited something it did not understand. A relic of a different era, a species-level memory trying to recreate something far older than its own timeline. The theory that the men of gold were based on Old One templates is not entirely far-fetched. The Old Ones created life that could interface with psychic dimensions, that could evolve alongside the fabric of the warp itself. They created beings of near-divine psychic control. The Slan were but one example. Is it so implausible that some flicker of this design, buried in the genome of humanity, reawakened in the techno-sorcery of ancient Earth? That what we call genius was actually genetic memory asserting itself? That the men of gold were not innovation, but remembrance? The implications are staggering. If true, then the men of gold were not merely the product of human ingenuity. They were the rediscovery of an ancient armament, an echo of a design seeded into humanity not for peace, but for war yet to come. And their destruction? Inevitable. For a weapon that awakens too early is a threat to all, including the species meant to wield it. Their fall may not have been a mistake. It may have been a safeguard, because something followed. After the men of gold came the men of stone, and then the men of iron. Each step further from perfection. Each generation less attuned to the psychic, more reliant on raw logic and code. It is as if the path was descending, not ascending. As if humanity had glimpsed its true nature in the men of gold and recoiled. Or worse, had been programmed to erase them once their function as a catalyst was complete. The Emperor himself, shrouded in myth and horror, is sometimes linked to these ancient beings. Some say he is the last of the men of gold. Others claim he was their creator. But what if he was their keeper, or their failsafe, or even the next iteration, forged not in labs but in ritual, drawing on every ounce of buried memory from a species unknowingly walking the path of a weaponized god? The men of gold were not a beginning. They were a reminder, a flare in the dark, pointing backwards toward a war long buried and a design long dormant. They did not lead humanity to greatness. They merely showed it what it was meant to become, and then vanished, leaving the dream unfinished, the weapon half awake. The Age of Strife was not just a dark chapter in human history. It was a crucible, a transformation in fire and madness. Worlds burned, psychers erupted like tumors in the soul of civilization, and the fabric of human society tore itself apart under the weight of its own psychic birth. And in this epic of horror, a question looms. Was this chaos the result of random mutation? Or was it the inevitable flowering of a species long seeded for psychic awakening? If the Old Ones crafted humanity as a weapon, then this was the moment the safeties failed, or were released. Before the Age of Strife, humanity's psychic potential existed, but it was a faint whisper. Isolated psychers, rare phenomena, prophetic dreams, signs of a deeper capability slumbering beneath the surface. But during the strife, the whisper became a scream. Billions of humans manifested uncontrolled psychic abilities. They burned their cities, summoned demons, collapsed the infrastructure of entire star systems. It was an apocalypse not of steel or fire, but of mind, and that is what makes it so telling. No natural evolutionary process accelerates this fast without external catalysts. In the span of mere generations, humanity went from a psychic rarity to a species-wide awakening. This suggests more than chance. It suggests programming, a dormant trait finally reaching critical mass. Perhaps it required a certain level of stress. Perhaps the encroachment of chaos finally broke the seals. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, this was the intended moment. The Age of Strife was not a failure. It was the first test firing of the weapon. And what a test it was. Every human world became a war zone, not just of armies, but of reality itself. Psychers twisted cities into maelstroms. Empires fell, not to external invasion, but to internal collapse. The Old Night was not the end of humanity. It was its unmaking and remaking. The Imperium that rose afterward was not a continuation of what came before. It was a new entity, forged in the warp fire of species-wide psychic trauma. A culture built around fear, control, and the harvesting of the very powers that once shattered it. In that rebuilding, we see the Old One's hand again, because what emerged was not a species that feared the warp, but one that sought to bind it, exploit it, weaponize it. The Black Ships, the Scholastica Psychana, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, entire institutions formed not to eliminate psychers, but to regulate and repurpose them. This is not the behavior of a species traumatized by psychic disaster. It is the instinct of a species beginning to understand its function, a weapon learning to wield its edge. And yet, even now, that edge is unstable. The Imperium cannot truly control the psyker bloom. It can only manage the fallout. The Emperor's great psychic infrastructure, the Astronomicon, the Golden Throne, the Soul Binding, are not triumphs. They are containment systems. He understood the danger, but perhaps also the necessity. Perhaps he saw what the Old Ones intended and chose to guide it, to steer it, rather than allow it to erupt again uncontrolled. Perhaps he was the shepherd of the weapon's activation phase, but if the Emperor guided, who lit the fuse? Some say chaos corrupted us. Others say the warp simply reached out. But what if the strife was always meant to be? What if the great pain of that age was not a failure, but a transformation? A phase in a cosmic program written before humanity had language? The Old Ones may be dust, but their tools still function. And if the psychic surge of the strife was their doing, even by delayed design, then we must accept that humanity's worst moments are not accidents. They are steps, calculated, horrific steps toward a function we still do not fully understand. The age of strife didn't break humanity. It broke the chrysalis, and what crawled out was not merely a survivor. It was something new, something terrible, something designed to think in blood, to dream in screams, to shape the warp not with art, but with agony. The old ones may not have lived to see it, but the weapon bloomed nonetheless. The Emperor is the axis around which human destiny turns, a being of such immense psychic power, such unfathomable will, that even the horrors of the warp bend around his silent throne. But his origins remain a mystery, cloaked in myth, contradiction, and silence. Some say he was born of the combined souls of ancient shamans. Others speak of science, proto-witchcraft, or unknown technologies lost to time. But among the darkest of fan theories is this. The Emperor was not merely the culmination of humanity's potential. He was its fail-safe, its final key, its awakening signal, a living fragment of the Old One's final war plan. Consider his nature. The Emperor is not just a psyker, he is the psyker, a singularity of soul that glows so bright in the immaterium it can blind demons and bend time. His understanding of the warp is not the fumbling knowledge of modern human sorcerers. It is total, intuitive. He manipulates it with the ease of one born to it, or perhaps made for it. That alone should chill the blood, because it suggests not just mastery, but inheritance. If the Old Ones needed a final command mechanism, a consciousness that could interpret their legacy and shepherd their creations, what better form than a self-aware god sealed within the species itself? A being that would not arise until the time was right, until the psychic bloom had begun, until the enemies of the Old Ones, the Necrons, the Satan, and even chaos itself, began to stir once more. The Emperor's rise was not just timely, it was precise, and his behavior mirrors that of a system moving from standby to active state. In the Unification Wars, he subdued Terra not with ideology, but with psychic presence and preternatural knowledge. He built the Primarchs, or perhaps reconstructed them, as generals, not saints, each a piece of a machine meant to reclaim the galaxy. But more than that, he attempted to subvert chaos not with denial, but with dominance. The Webway project, the Thousand Suns patronage, the pariah gene, all speak to a being not trying to escape the warp, but reshape it, just like the Old Ones once did. Some whisper he is the last of the Slan, evolved or preserved in human form. Others claim he is an artificial soul, rebooted from the remains of the Men of Gold, installed into human flesh. But whatever the truth, it is undeniable that he moves not like a king, but like a protocol. He has no equal among his species, because he is not of them. He is for them. He is the instruction that decodes the chaos, the conductor that harmonizes the weapon. And what of his silence, the refusal to explain himself, the layers of mystification, the destruction of his own history? These are not just signs of tyranny. They may be signs of constraint. If he is the key, perhaps he does not even remember the lock. Or perhaps he does, and understands that revealing the true nature of humanity would collapse the Imperium in madness. What empire can survive the revelation that it was built not by free will, but by ancient design? The Emperor's final condition, a corpse on a throne, yet still conscious, still directing, mirrors the concept of a system in terminal function. He no longer walks, no longer speaks, but he still acts. Through astropaths, through visions, through the slow unfurling of psycho-emergence across the stars. He is not dead, he is embedded. A logic bomb at the heart of a dying species, a signal still being broadcast. Perhaps he waits for something. Or perhaps he is still executing the last lines of a program written by a hand so ancient it has turned to dust. To see the Emperor as a god is to misunderstand him. To see him as a man is to miss the terror. He may be the final fragment of the Old One's plan, a being forged not to rule, but to awaken something, or someone, or everyone. And if that is true, then the Golden Throne is not a tomb. It is a beacon, a signal that the final phase of the weapon is near. There is a strange, persistent dread that haunts the Necrons. For all their pride, all their logic, and all their ancient dominance, they fear something they refuse to name, yet act to suppress across every quadrant of the galaxy. That fear, many believe, is chaos. But look closer. Their hatred for the warp is clinical, methodical, a war against entropy. But their actions toward humanity are different. Not tactical, desperate. There is a horror in their silence, a warning in their extermination campaigns. As if they recognize us, not as mere pests, but as a nightmare made flesh. A weapon they remember. During the war in heaven, the Old Ones created armies of biological species to resist the soulless Necron and their godlike masters, the Shaitan. Many of those creations have vanished or changed beyond recognition. But what if one remained? Or better yet, what if one waited? What if humanity is the weapon the Necrons thought buried forever, now reawakened and walking in ignorance across the stars? It would explain much. The Necrons do not just attack humanity for strategic resources. They target human psychers. They obliterate populations without warning. They deploy tomb fleets on seemingly irrational crusades of extermination, bypassing more dangerous threats to focus on isolated human worlds. This isn't logic. This is fear. This is suppression. And consider their obsession with the pariah gene, the mysterious anti-psyker mutation found in rare humans, which nullifies warp presence and can even cause nausea or panic in demonic entities. The Necrons seek these individuals not to destroy them, but to harness them. They build temples around them. They experiment. They try to mass-produce them. Why? Because they know. They know humanity is not just another species. It is a doorway, a bridge, a bomb. Perhaps the Necrons once fought this weapon and thought it neutralized. Perhaps they remember a time, long before modern human history, when a similar species bloomed and nearly undid them. Or perhaps, even more chillingly, they were warned. The Old Ones, in their final throes, may have left signals in the psychic fabric of reality. Traps set in motion, coordinates pointing to the rise of humanity. And now, as those coordinates flare to life, the Necrons panic. The Silent King, who returned from exile with newfound purpose, has said little of humanity beyond tactical observation. But his strategies have shifted. More attention is paid to human expansion. More tomb worlds awaken near Imperial sectors, and more Necron resources are dedicated to anti-psyker measures, not to fight chaos directly, but to stop human interaction with it. Because if chaos is a fire, humanity is its wind. This fear is not irrational. It is ancient. It is baked into Necron memory, etched into their very protocols. They do not fear what humanity is now. They fear what it is becoming, or what it always was. And they may be the only ones who truly understand what the final form of that transformation means. It is not dominance. It is not empire. It is annihilation. Because to the Necrons, the worst possible enemy is not one that fights them on the battlefield, but one that corrupts the very metaphysics of their existence. The warp is chaos. The Old Ones used it as a weapon. And if humanity is the last echo of their strategy, then we are not just wielders of that chaos. We are it. Walking entropy, living algorithms of disorder, a species that spreads war not through strategy, but through presence. This is why the Necrons cannot let us be. This is why they rise in ever greater numbers. They are not reclaiming the galaxy. They are trying to contain it, trying to stop the fire from reaching its final blaze. And deep within their blackened protocols, they may already know the truth. They are too late. Chaos. It is the great threat. The devourer of reason, the whisperer in dreams, the warping storm that bends the galaxy into madness. For millennia, the Imperium has fought to contain it, to wall it off with faith, fire and silence. But if we dare look deeper, past dogma, past terror, a more terrible theory arises. What if chaos is not the enemy of humanity? What if it is the result, the consequence, or worse, the purpose? What if the Old Ones, in their final desperation, seeded not only a species into the stars, but a psychic detonation designed to rupture reality itself? The warp was once calm. That much is known, or at least believed. A realm of shifting potential, not yet choked with gods or nightmares. It was the Aldari who first flooded it with emotion, beauty, and eventually corruption. But even they, for all their pride, cannot match the sheer mass of psychic output humanity now produces. Trillions of souls, billions of psychers, countless dreams, fears, loves, and hatreds pouring into the immaterium every moment. It is a storm of soul force unlike anything the galaxy has seen, and it grows, uncontrolled, unstoppable. The rise of chaos as a true pantheon, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, aligns too closely with the psychic awakening of humanity to be dismissed as coincidence. These gods, these primal echoes of mortal emotion, did not always exist in their current form. They evolved, they fed, and humanity has become their banquet. But what if that was the point? What if the Old Ones, unable to defeat the Necrons and the C'tan in real space, sought to poison the galaxy instead? What if they built a species that would break the warp through overexposure, destabilizing the very substrate of existence? This is the theory's darkest edge, that chaos was not a side effect, but a weapon in itself. The Old Ones may have realized that the Necrons' immunity to the warp made them vulnerable only through indirect means. What better trap than to unleash a psychic species that would unravel the walls of reality, letting demons pour through, letting hunger consume logic, letting the gods of madness feast on everything? Not controlled destruction, but pure entropy. A cosmic backfire so total it would engulf allies and enemies alike. Humanity's unique relationship with chaos supports this. We are not just vulnerable to it. We interact with it. We bargain with demons. We ascend into demonhood. We resist corruption only to eventually embrace it. Even our gods, the Emperor, the Primarchs, become pieces in its endless game. The Chaos Gods are shaped by us as much as we are shaped by them. This is not mere influence. This is symbiosis. And that kind of relationship doesn't arise from accident. It arises from intention. The Emperor understood this. His psychic silence was not just to preserve the veil. It was to delay the inevitable. His webway project was not an escape. It was an attempt to bypass the warp entirely, to build a reality separate from chaos. But even he failed. And in that failure, the last safeguard fell. The weapon, if that is what we are, completed its ignition phase. Now the galaxy burns, and chaos spreads not just because of evil or weakness or temptation. It spreads because the species at the heart of the galaxy feeds it. We do not merely fight chaos. We are chaos, its voice, its seed, its continuation. And in every battle, every heresy, every scream into the warp, we fulfill a function we never chose, to keep the fire burning until there is nothing left to save. If the Old Ones built us to destroy their enemies, then the final cruelty is this: we succeeded. But not cleanly, not heroically. We did not win a war. We ignited a furnace, a galaxy-spanning psychic engine of endless contradiction. And now, that engine consumes not only the Necrons or the C'tan, but everything, including us, including whatever hope might have remained. Chaos is not our enemy, it is our mirror, and perhaps in the design of ancient gods, it is our legacy. The galaxy is littered with the ruins of civilizations that once thought themselves eternal. The Aldari, proud and beautiful, shattered themselves in a scream that still echoes through the immaterium. The Necrons, immortal and cold, slumbered away their supremacy only to awaken to a galaxy no longer theirs. And now, At the peak of its tortured dominion stands humanity, not as heir, not as successor, but as something altogether different. And perhaps, more horrifyingly, as something planned to replace the fallen. Not evolution, not coincidence, but design, a cycle repeating. The Aldari were the Old One's chosen artisans of the warp, elegant, psychically gifted, spiritually attuned. But they failed their creators. Their passion turned to indulgence. Their mastery gave birth to a god of oblivion. And in that failure, a vacuum was created, one that could not be left unfilled. If the Aldari were the scalpel, then perhaps humanity was meant to be the hammer. A new tool, rough and imperfect, but terrifyingly effective. This theory suggests a brutal kind of succession, not one based on worth, but on function. When the Aldari fell, they tore open the warp in ways even the Old Ones may not have predicted. But if that rift, the birth of Slaanesh, was seen by the lingering patterns of their creators, then it might have served as a signal. A final confirmation that the first psychic weapon had failed, and the next one, the backup, needed to awaken. Humanity rose in the ashes of the Aldari fall. This is no coincidence. As the psychic tide of the Aldari receded, human psychers began to bloom. The galaxy shifted from the grace of ancient soul architecture to the brutal pragmatism of human conquest. And every step of that path has mirrored not progress, but reclamation, the slow, merciless occupation of territory once held by the long-dead tools of the Old One's design. Even our weaknesses reflect this function. The Aldari fell because of too much sensitivity. Humanity, by contrast, is thick-skinned and chaotic. We are not built for harmony with the warp. We are built to survive it, to bend it, to weaponize it not with precision, but with overwhelming psychic mass. Our faith is not elegant, it is explosive. Our response to chaos is not finesse, it is extermination. This is not improvement, this is contingency, the backup plan, the fallback fire. And that fire spreads. Human civilization, despite all its decay and repression, continues to grow. Even the Imperium, a rotting theocracy of contradiction and pain, still expands its reach, still fights wars on 1,000 fronts, still births new psychers, new saints, new monsters. It is not a civilization, it is a firestorm, and in its wake, the Aldari diminish. Their gods are dead or broken, their people scattered, their purpose long ago fulfilled or forfeited. If the Old Ones meant to cycle tools, then this is the final, cruelest stage of their plan. Humanity is not a successor to the Aldari in the sense of glory or culture. We are their replacement only as function. We are not what comes after enlightenment. We are what comes after failure, a blunter, harsher tool to finish what the refined instrument could not. The final weapon, not of precision, but of desperation. There is tragedy in this. The Aldari mourn their fall, but humanity never even had the chance to understand its rise. We do not remember being chosen. We do not know our creators. We do not mourn the loss of beauty, because we were never meant to preserve it. We are the fire that consumes the palace after the king is slain. We are not the next empire. We are the end of empires. In this way, the galaxy tells a story in cycles. The Old Ones shaped the Aldari. The Aldari fell. The Old Ones shaped humanity, or left behind a pattern that would. And now humanity rises, blind to its legacy, armed with ignorance and wrath, carving a path not of civilization, but of fulfillment, of a purpose buried in bone and blood, of a succession not celebrated, but enforced by inevitability. Mankind is not the next chapter. Mankind is the last page written in flame. If one accepts the premise that humanity was crafted, seeded as a weapon in a war whose fires died out long before the first stone cities rose on Terra, then the question shifts. Not whether we were made, but whether we are still operating as intended. And the answer, chillingly, may be yes, because nothing else explains our behavior, our persistence, our spiral toward oblivion that looks, from the right angle, not like failure, but like completion. Like the final sequence of a program written in a dead language, a weapon still firing. Humanity has not built peace, not for itself, not for others. Across 10,000 years of Imperium, we have only known war. We burn the stars to sustain a bloated, blind theocracy. We conscript the weak, worship pain, silence innovation, and mutilate knowledge, and yet we endure. We thrive in contradiction. We do not seek progress. We seek victory, always, at any cost. These are not the behaviors of a species lost. These are the expressions of something following orders it does not remember receiving. Every institution of the Imperium supports this theory. The Adeptus Mechanicus preserves war machines without understanding them. The Inquisition roots out deviation not for truth, but for cohesion. The Astra Militarum sacrifices billions without hesitation. The Space Marines, engineered gods in human form, do not create, they destroy. Every system is optimized not for civilization, but for execution. The weapon is not dormant. It is not broken. It is active. And it is us. And perhaps, most tragically, it is successful. The Necrons, once dominant, are fractured. The Citan are shattered, enslaved, diminished. The Aldari are ghosts. Chaos, though still a threat, has been channeled, in some places even used. And the Tyranids, that final great devourer, face a resistance no other prey has mounted, an empire that does not yield. Mankind fights, always, endlessly. And in that blood-soaked resilience, the mission may be fulfilled. But what is the mission? What was the endgame the Old Ones saw in us? Some say it was vengeance, that we were built not to win, but to ensure no one else could. Others claim it was containment, that our psychic emissions were meant to drown the warp in so much noise that order could never again rise. Or perhaps it was evolution, to birth something new from the ruins. But in truth, the galaxy gives no clear answer. It only gives patterns, and those patterns suggest this. The fire was never meant to go out. It was meant to spread. We do not conquer to rule. We conquer to burn. And we burn without regret, without end, without ever questioning why. That is the core of the theory, that we are not off course. We are on course, precisely, horribly on course. The Old Ones may be gone, but the war continues. Not because we remember it, but because we are the echo of its rage, the aftershock, the last scream of gods whose names have been forgotten, but whose intent still pulses in every drop of human blood. This is the final horror, that we are not lost children or ascending mortals. We are a weapon, long fired, still operating, and without a target anymore. We annihilate not because we choose to, but because we must, because that is the shape of our soul, burned into us by hands too ancient to name. We do not need the Old Ones anymore. We do not need guidance. The programming is embedded, the trigger pulled, and the gun keeps firing, because that's what it was built to do, because that's what we were built to do, and because nothing remains to stop it. The Old Ones are gone, their empires reduced to whispers in ancient stone and flickering anomalies in warp space. Their tools lie broken, their enemies, the Khitan, the Necrons, the gods of chaos, still crawl across the stars, but none untouched by madness or ruin. And yet, in this dying galaxy, in this age of darkness, one force moves with unrelenting certainty. Mankind, not in glory, not in wisdom, but in fire. We are not the inheritors. We are the aftermath. The last shot in a war long ended. The gun is empty. The target is lost. But the weapon still fires. Look at us. Look at what we are. We build shrines from machine parts. We use psychic screams to guide starships. We sanctify death. We mutilate our own to survive. And still we rise. Still we spread. Not because we understand the galaxy, but because we were made to endure it. We are not an accident of evolution. We are the residue of design. A living contingency coded in pain and forged in ignorance, now unleashed without oversight. The galaxy burns, not because we choose to set it aflame, but because we cannot stop. The Imperium is not a civilization. It is a detonation frozen mid-blast. The slow-motion echo of a weapon that was fired 10,000 years ago, or 10 million. Every world we touch is reforged in blood and worship. Every xeno-species we encounter is either exterminated or enslaved. And the warp? The warp is no longer just an enemy. It is our medium, our canvas, our consequence. We speak of the Emperor's divine plan, of the God Emperor's will. But what if he was only following instructions buried in the deepest strata of psychic memory? What if the final phase of the Old One's plan wasn't salvation, but ignition? Not to preserve life, but to destroy whatever had survived them, to unmake the unkillable, to introduce entropy into the last secure systems of the galaxy. Humanity was not meant to thrive. We were meant to terminate. And now, with no hand on the trigger, no mind to guide the shot, the weapon fires blindly. Aimless. Faith replaces memory. Dogma replaces function. But the impact remains. Our wars continue. Our crusades multiply. Even in death, the Emperor's psychic presence scours the stars. Even in failure, the Imperium expands. We are not guided. We are compelled. We are the final subroutine of an extinct god. The Necrons try to erase us. The Tyranids try to consume us. Chaos tries to absorb us. But we persist. Not because we are strong, but because we are unfinished. Because we are still running, still executing, still cascading forward like a signal that has not yet reached its terminus. A scream in code meant to erase or rewrite whatever remains. And perhaps the true tragedy is this. There is no target anymore. Whatever the Old Ones feared, whatever enemy they built us to destroy, may already be gone. Obliterated, sealed, scattered across dimensions we can no longer reach. And still, we fire. Still, we burn. Still, we expand. Not because we seek meaning, but because we were never given the option to stop. That is the cruelest legacy of all, that we were made not to understand, not to choose, not to become, but to act, to move, to destroy. The galaxy is not ours, but we consume it anyway. The throne is empty, but we defend it anyway. The gods are dead, but we worship them anyway, because that is what we were built to do. So when you look upon the stars and see the banners of the Imperium, the void-born cathedrals, the angelic monstrosities of the Adeptus Astartes, the blood-soaked battalions of the Guard, understand this. You are not looking at the future of sentient life. You are looking at its terminus, its fire, its end. Humanity is not the next step. Humanity is the final one. And the gun is still firing. If you've made it this far, subscribe for more grimdark theories and deep dives into Warhammer 40k lore. Because in this galaxy of war, even ideas are weapons. And together, we'll keep pulling the trigger.